The silence of deep space shattered as reality tore open like a wound. Energy crackled and danced around the edges of the hyperspace portal, casting strange shadows across the void. From within that swirling darkness emerged something that should not have existed. A ship, crude and angular, drifted through the portal before the gateway sealed itself shut with a thunderous burst of light. Admiral Corvin had seen many vessels in his 40 years of service to the hegemony of 7 worlds. Sleek cruisers with energy shields that could deflect stars. Battleships that moved like dancers through space, their hulls gleaming with advanced alloys that bent light itself. This thing before him was none of those. It looked like someone had taken metal plates and hammered them together with primitive tools. Thick, ugly armor covered every surface. Strange protrusions jutted out at odd angles. The ship's energy signature was weak, barely registering on his sensors. "What is that abomination?" Corvin asked his science officer. Lieutenant Thane studied, his displays with growing confusion. "Sir, the vessel appears to be constructed from basic steel alloys. Their propulsion system is generating massive amounts of waste heat. The design is completely inefficient by any known standard." Corvin laughed, a sound that echoed through the bridge of his flagship. "Another primitive species seeking our attention. How delightfully predictable." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel. Let us see what manner of savages have stumbled into our territory." The view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the alien vessel. Corvin expected to see creatures cowering in fear, or perhaps trying to display dominance through aggressive posturing. Instead, he found himself looking at a human male who appeared remarkably calm. The being had dark hair touched with gray and eyes that held no fear, only curiosity. "Greetings," the human said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Captain David Hayes of the United Earth ship JÖRMUNGANDR. We come from Terra seeking peaceful contact and trade opportunities with the civilized worlds of this region." Corvin raised an eyebrow. The primitives spoke their language fluently and showed no signs of intimidation. How refreshing. "I am Admiral Corvin of the Hegemony Fleet. You have entered sovereign space without authorization. Your vessel will submit to immediate inspection or face the consequences." Hayes smiled slightly. "I appreciate your position, Admiral, but we must respectfully decline. Our ship contains sensitive materials that we cannot allow foreign inspection. We seek only safe passage and perhaps an opportunity to establish diplomatic relations." The bridge fell silent. In 300 years of hegemony expansion, no species had ever refused their demands. Corvin felt his mandibles click together in irritation. "You do not understand your situation, primitive. This region of space belongs to the hegemony. We are the dominant power in this sector. Submit to inspection or be destroyed." Hayes exchanged glances with someone off-screen. When he looked back, his expression had not changed. "Admiral, we have traveled a very long way to be here. Our mission is peaceful, but we are prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. I hope it does not come to that." Corvin studied the human's face. There was something unsettling about his calm demeanor. Most species showed fear when faced with hegemony power. This creature seemed almost bored. "You threaten us? With that scrap heap you call a ship?" "Not a threat, Admiral. A statement of fact. We would prefer to resolve this diplomatically." The communication ended as Hayes cut the channel. Corvin stared at the blank screen, his anger rising. No one spoke to the hegemony with such casual dismissal. He turned to his tactical officer. "How many ships do we need to destroy that piece of garbage?" Commander Rex examined his console. "Sir, based on their energy output and defensive capabilities, a single cruiser should be sufficient. Their weapons appear to be primitive kinetic projectiles and some form of plasma discharge. Nothing that could threaten our shields." Corvin nodded. "Very well. Signal the destroyer Swift Strike. Have them disable the alien vessel. We will board it and teach these humans proper respect." As his orders were transmitted, Corvin settled back in his command chair. Another day, another primitive species learning their place in the galactic order. The human ship hung motionless in space, apparently waiting for their response. Its hull was scarred and marked, suggesting it had seen combat before. But what could such a crude vessel have possibly faced that would pose any real threat? The swift strike moved into position, its sleek hull gleaming under the distant starlight. The destroyer was a work of art, its energy weapons capable of cracking moon-sized asteroids. Against the human ship, it would be like using an antimatter bomb to kill an insect. "Sir," Lieutenant Thane called out, his voice confused. "I am reading something unusual about the human vessel." "Elaborate." "The ship we are seeing appears to be only a small portion of a much larger structure. These readings suggest the bulk of their vessel is folded into subspace somehow. What we are observing may be merely their command section." Corvin frowned. "That is impossible. Subspace folding requires technology we have only theorized about. Show me these readings." The tactical display shifted, revealing energy patterns. That made no sense. If the readings were accurate, the human ship was not just larger than it appeared. It was massive beyond comprehension. But how could such primitive beings possess technology that advanced? "Sir, the swift strike is requesting permission to engage." Corvin hesitated for the first time in decades. Something about this situation felt wrong. The humans' confidence, their advanced language skills, and now these impossible readings. But the hegemony did not show weakness. They could not afford to. "Permission granted. Minimum force. We want prisoners for interrogation." The destroyer's weapons charged with a high-pitched whine that carried even through the vacuum of space. Energy lances shot toward the human vessel, designed to disable their engines and weapon systems. The beams struck the ship's hull, and nothing happened. The human vessel continued floating in space, completely unaffected by weapons that should have crippled it. Corvin stood up from his chair, staring at the display in disbelief. "What just happened?" "Sir, their defensive systems appear to have absorbed our weapons fire completely. No damage detected to their hull or systems." On the view screen, the human ship began to change. Panels slid aside with mechanical precision. Hidden weapon ports opened along its hull like the eyes of some awakening predator, and from deep within its structure came a sound that should not have been possible in the vacuum of space. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to shake reality itself. Dr. Ann Foster had been studying alien languages for 15 years, but she had never expected her expertise to be needed in a situation quite like this. The linguistics department aboard JÖRMUNGANDR was located deep within the ship's core, surrounded by layers of armor that could withstand planetary bombardment. Through the reinforced viewports, she could see the alien vessels positioning themselves in what was clearly an attack formation. Captain Hayes to linguistics. "Dr. Foster, please report to the bridge immediately." She gathered her translation, matrices, and cultural analysis files, then made her way through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy. The ship felt different now, as if some sleeping giant was slowly awakening. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, their faces calm despite the obvious threat outside. The bridge was a study in controlled tension. Captain Hayes stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien fleet maneuver. The main screen showed 3 massive warships, each one easily twice the size of what the aliens could see of JÖRMUNGANDR. Their hulls were smooth and organic-looking, covered in what appeared to be living metal that shifted and flowed, like liquid mercury. "Doctor, we need to know everything you can tell us about their communication patterns and cultural indicators," Hayes said without turning around. Foster activated her workstation and began analyzing the transmitted data from their earlier conversation. The alien admiral, Corvin, shows clear signs of hierarchical thinking. His species appears to value dominance displays and expects immediate submission from perceived inferiors. The translator caught several linguistic markers suggesting extreme arrogance and a complete lack of diplomatic experience with equals. Meaning, they have never encountered a species they could not simply crush into submission. This is new territory for them. As if summoned by their conversation, the communication system activated. This time, a different alien appeared on screen. This one was larger than Admiral Corvin, with scarred chitin covering his face and arms, that ended in wicked-looking claws. His voice was rougher, more aggressive. "Humans, I am General Voss of the Hegemony Warfleet. You have exactly 1 minute to lower your defenses and prepare for boarding, or we will reduce your pathetic vessel to space dust. Hayes stepped forward, his voice remaining perfectly level. General, I am Captain David Hayes. As I explained to Admiral Corvin, we seek peaceful relations. We have no desire for conflict. Voss laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Peaceful? You fired upon our destroyer. Foster quickly checked the tactical logs. Captain, we have not fired a single shot. Their weapons simply had no effect on our defensive systems. Hayes nodded. General, we have not fired upon any of your vessels. Your weapons were ineffective against our shields. We remain committed to a peaceful resolution. Lies. No primitive technology can withstand hegemony weapons, Voss snarled. You will submit or die. The channel closed. On the tactical display, all 3 enemy vessels began charging their weapons. Energy readings spiked as massive guns swiveled toward the human ship. Captain, the tactical officer called out. Multiple targeting locks. They are preparing to fire everything they have. Hayes turned to Foster. Doctor, in your professional opinion, is there any chance of reasoning with them? Foster studied the linguistic patterns and behavioral analysis. No, sir. Their entire culture appears to be built around the concept of overwhelming force. They literally cannot comprehend that we might be their equals or superiors. To them, our survival of their first attack was either impossible or some kind of trick. Understood. Hayes moved to his command chair. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for combat. Defensive protocols only until further notice. The bridge lights dimmed as power was redirected to defensive systems. Through the viewports, Foster could see space itself beginning to distort around JÖRMUNGANDR. As gravitational shields came online, the ship groaned and shifted, but not from strain. It sounded almost eager. The alien fleet opened fire in a coordinated barrage that lit up space like a newborn star. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and energy weapons Foster did not recognize struck the human vessel from 3 directions simultaneously. The ship shook slightly, but the attacks seemed to accomplish nothing more than the first one had. On the tactical display, their defensive readings had barely flickered. Damage report, Hayes called. No damage, sir. Shields at 98% and climbing. Their weapons appear to be primarily energy-based. Our defensive matrix is actually converting their attacks into additional power for our systems. General, Voss appeared on screen again, his face twisted with rage and confusion. What are you? What manner of deception is this? Hayes stood up slowly. No deception, General. We are humans from Terra. We offered peace. You chose war. Impossible. Nothing can withstand the combined firepower of 3 hegemony battleships. Foster found herself fascinated by the alien's reaction. His entire worldview was crumbling before his eyes. For species accustomed to technological superiority, encountering something beyond their understanding was literally incomprehensible. Captain, the sensor operator announced, his voice tight with sudden tension. Long-range sensors are detecting something massive approaching from deep space. Distance approximately 12 light hours and closing fast. Hayes frowned. Can you identify it? Negative, sir. The object is huge, larger than anything in our databases. Energy signature is unlike anything we have encountered before. Whatever it is definitely not natural. On the alien communication channel, Foster could see General Voss receiving similar reports from his own officers. The alien's expression changed from anger to something that looked suspiciously like terror. By the void, Voss whispered. No, it cannot be. They have been silent for over 1,000 years. General, Hayes said, his voice cutting through the alien's panic. What is approaching us? Voss looked at the human captain with eyes that held genuine fear. Devourer, an ancient enemy that consumes entire worlds. Our legends speak of ships the size of moons that strip planets bare and leave nothing but empty space in their wake. Foster felt her blood turn cold. She had studied the transmission logs from dozens of alien civilizations, and there were scattered references to something called the Devourers. ancient machines that had terrorized the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing. How long since the last sighting? Hayes asked. 1,437 years, Voss replied, his earlier aggression completely forgotten. They vanished without explanation. We thought they were extinct. The long-range sensors updated their display. The approaching object was indeed massive, easily the size of Earth's moon. Its surface was covered in what appeared to be mechanical structures, all focused on a single purpose. Consumption. Captain, the tactical officer reported. The object has changed course. It is heading directly for the New Haven system. Foster pulled up the star charts. New Haven was the inhabited system with 12 billion sentient beings spread across 4 planets. If the legends about the Devourers were true, those beings had perhaps days to live. On screen, General Voss was receiving frantic reports from his fleet. All ships, immediate withdrawal to New Haven, maximum speed, we must warn them. General, Hayes called out, stopping the alien commander. How effective are your weapons against this devourer? Voss looked at him with hollow eyes. Completely ineffective. The last time our ancestors faced one of these creatures, they lost 400 ships without inflicting any measurable damage. Their adaptive shielding makes them essentially invulnerable to energy weapons. Hayes nodded slowly. What about kinetic weapons? Physical projectiles? Primitive weapons? What could those possibly accomplish that our advanced arsenal cannot? The human captain smiled grimly. Perhaps we should find out. JÖRMUNGANDR, change course. Intercept trajectory for the devourer. Foster stared at him in shock. Captain, you cannot be serious. We are one ship against something that destroyed entire fleets. Hayes looked at her with eyes that held depths she had never seen before. Doctor, you said their culture cannot comprehend equals or superiors. Well, they are about to learn what humans call a learning experience. The ship began to turn, its course shifting toward the approaching nightmare. And deep within JÖRMUNGANDR's hull, systems that had never been fully awakened began to stir. The thing that emerged from deep space was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was a mechanical organism, a fusion of technology and hunger that had been drifting between stars for over a millennium. Its surface writhed with metallic tentacles that served as both weapons and feeding mechanisms. Countless sensors swept space ahead of it, searching for the energy signatures of living worlds. It had been dormant for so long that the galaxy had forgotten its name. The few surviving records called it different things in different languages, but all translations carried the same meaning: the end of everything. Commander Rex watched the tactical displays with growing horror as more details became available. The Devourer was not just massive. It was actively growing as it traveled, consuming asteroids and space debris to add to its bulk. What had started as a moon-sized object was now approaching the size of a small planet. Sir, his sensor operator reported to Admiral Corvin, the entity has deployed what appear to be harvesting drones. They are moving ahead of the main body toward the outer planets of the New Haven system. Corvin felt his blood turn cold. The outer planets were gas giants with small colonies on their moons, mining stations and research facilities with minimal defenses. If the Devourer was following the same pattern described in the ancient records, it would strip those facilities bare to fuel its approach to the inhabited worlds. Signal the fleet. Emergency speed to New Haven. Transmit evacuation warnings to all colonies. As his ships prepared to withdraw from the confrontation with the humans, Corvin found himself looking back at the primitive vessel that had caused so much confusion. The human ship was changing course as well, but not toward safety. It was moving to intercept the Devourer. Admiral, Commander Rex said quietly, the humans appear to be on a collision course with the entity. Corvin activated the communication channel one more time. Captain Hayes appeared on screen, his expression calm despite the approaching horror. Human, you must retreat immediately. That creature has destroyed entire civilizations. Your vessel, no matter how unusual, cannot possibly stand against it. Hayes nodded acknowledgement. Admiral, we appreciate your concern. However, we have a different perspective on the situation. You will die, all of you. Perhaps, but we prefer to make that determination ourselves. Hayes paused, studying something off-screen. Admiral, you mentioned that your ancestors lost 400 ships in their last encounter with the Devourer. How long did that battle last? Corvin felt his mandibles click nervously. According to historical records, the engagement lasted 37 minutes. Our weapons had no effect whatsoever on the creature's adaptive shielding. Interesting. What types of weapons were used? Everything we possessed. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, gravitational weapons. The entity's hull adapted to each attack within seconds, becoming completely immune to that form of damage. Hayes seemed to be taking notes. Did your ancestors attempt any kinetic attacks? Physical projectiles rather than energy weapons? Corvin stared at him. Kinetic weapons? You mean throwing rocks? That is caveman technology. What could such primitive methods accomplish that our most advanced arsenals could not? The human captain smiled slightly. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Admiral. We will know soon enough. The communication ended, leaving Corvin staring at a blank screen. Throwing rocks at a creature that had survived every advanced weapon known to galactic science. The humans were either completely insane or knew something that 3 million years of galactic civilization had missed. As the hegemony fleet raced toward New Haven to begin evacuation procedures, long-range sensors brought increasingly bad news. The Devourer's advanced drones had reached the outer system and were systematically stripping the mining colonies bare. Millions of tons of refined metal and processed materials were being consumed and integrated into the creature's growing bulk. The first desperate transmissions from New Haven Central Command were already reaching them. Panic was spreading as astronomical sensors detected the approaching nightmare. 12 billion souls were crying out for salvation that might not exist. Behind them, the lone human vessel continued its impossible course towards certain destruction. Corvin found himself wondering what manner of species would sacrifice themselves for worlds they had never seen, people they had never met. As if reading his thoughts, Commander Rex spoke quietly. "Sir, why would they do this? They owe us nothing. We were prepared to destroy them just hours ago." Corvin had no answer. In 3 centuries of hegemony expansion, they had encountered thousands of species. Some fought bravely for their own worlds. Others submitted immediately to superior force. But none had ever willingly flown toward annihilation to protect strangers. The tactical display updated with new information about the human vessel. Somehow, it was accelerating far beyond what their earlier scans had suggested was possible. Energy readings were climbing steadily, but the sources remained mysterious. Whatever powered JÖRMUNGANDR was unlike any technology in hegemony databases. "Sir, the human ship is beginning some kind of transformation sequence." Corvin turned to look at the long-range visual feed. What he saw made no sense. The crude, angular vessel was unfolding like some impossible flower. Sections of hull were sliding apart to reveal structures that had been hidden within subspace folds. What had appeared to be a single ship was revealing itself to be something far more complex. Gun. Turrets emerged from hidden bays. Weapons that looked nothing like the elegant energy systems of advanced civilizations. These were brutal mechanical things that belonged in a museum of primitive warfare. But the sheer number of them was staggering. "How many weapon systems are they deploying?" Corvin asked. Commander Rex checked his readings 3 times before answering. "Sir, current count is over 15,000 individual weapons ranging from what appear to be kinetic projectile systems to some form of contained nuclear fusion devices. Nuclear weapons in space combat?" "Yes, sir. Along with what our computers are identifying as railguns, mass drivers, and something our translation matrix calls planet crackers." Corvin felt his understanding of the universe shift slightly. Planet crackers, weapons designed not to defeat enemy ships but to literally break worlds apart. What manner of species develop such excessive firepower? As JÖRMUNGANDR completed its transformation, the Devourer became aware of the approaching threat. Ancient sensors that had slept for over 1,000 years awakened to analyze this new opponent. What they found, confused the mechanical intelligence that lurked within the creature's core. This was not like the energy-based civilizations it remembered. This ship radiated heat signatures consistent with primitive chemical and nuclear reactions. Its weapons were crude by the standards of the species the devourer had consumed, but there was something unsettling about their design. They seemed built with only one purpose in mind: absolute destruction. The devourer altered course slightly, curious about this anomaly. It had consumed the weapons and knowledge of thousands of civilizations over millions of years. Surely this primitive vessel could teach it nothing new. On the bridge of JÖRMUNGANDR, Captain Hayes received the final systems report from his weapons officer. "Sir, all weapon systems are online and ready. Nuclear arsenal is armed and targeted. Railguns are loaded with depleted uranium slugs. Mass drivers are prepared to fire tungsten penetrators at significant fractions of light speed." Hayes nodded calmly. "What is our estimated time to contact?" 17 minutes, sir." The captain turned to address his crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to engage an enemy that has terrorized this galaxy for millions of years. Our new alien friends believe we cannot win because their advanced weapons failed. They may be right, but they have never seen what happens when humans are truly angry." He paused, looking around the bridge at faces that showed no fear, only grim determination. "The creature ahead of us intends to consume 12 billion innocent lives. This is unacceptable. We will stop it or die trying. All stations, prepare for combat." In the distance, the devourer continued its approach to New Haven, supremely confident in its invulnerability. It had faced countless civilizations and absorbed their knowledge, their weapons, their very essence, but it had never faced humanity. And humanity had never learned the meaning of the word impossible. The first exchange happened at a distance of 50,000 kilometers. The devourer, confident in its superiority, launched a probing attack with its forward weapon clusters. Energy beams that could boil oceans struck JÖRMUNGANDR's hull, testing the strange ship's defenses. The beams splashed harmlessly against gravitational barriers that bent space itself around the human vessel. But Captain Hayes was not interested in purely defensive measures. Weapons free. Target the creature's forward sensor array. Fire. What happened next violated every principle of civilized space warfare. Instead of elegant energy weapons that could be adapted to or defended against, JÖRMUNGANDR unleashed hell itself. Railguns fired tungsten slugs accelerated to 30% of light speed. The projectiles struck the devourer's hull with kinetic force equivalent to small nuclear weapons, but they were just the beginning. Mass drivers hurled depleted uranium penetrators the size of telephone poles. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked across space, their primitive guidance systems locked onto the massive target. The devourer's adaptive shielding tried to compensate for the incoming attacks, but found itself facing something it had never encountered before. These were not energy weapons that could be deflected or absorbed. These were chunks of matter moving at velocities that turned physics into a weapon. The first impact sent shockwaves through the creature's hull. Armor that had withstood antimatter weapons cracked and shattered under the sheer mechanical force of the human attack. The devourer's intelligence, ancient and vast, experienced something it had not felt in millions of years: pain. The creature retaliated with everything it possessed. Weapon systems that had consumed entire star fleets opened fire simultaneously. Space itself seemed to burn as enough energy to sterilize a planet focused on the lone human ship. JÖRMUNGANDR absorbed the punishment like a mountain enduring a storm. Her shields flared and sparked but held, and her response was immediate and terrifying. "Deploy the planet crackers," Hayes ordered calmly. From hidden bays deep within the ship's hull emerged weapons that had no business existing outside of planetary bombardment scenarios. Each planet cracker was essentially a miniature star contained within magnetic fields and launched at significant fractions of light speed. They were weapons designed by a species that had learned warfare on a world where survival meant absolute victory or complete extinction. The first planet cracker struck the devourer's central mass and detonated with the force of a stellar collapse. The creature's hull, which had resisted every advanced weapon for millions of years, simply ceased to exist in a sphere nearly a kilometer across. The devourer's scream echoed across multiple dimensions, as its distributed intelligence struggled to comprehend what had just happened to it. This was not energy that could be adapted to or deflected. This was matter and energy being converted directly according to the most basic laws of physics, unleashed by beings who apparently viewed the complete annihilation of their enemies as the only acceptable outcome of battle. It tried to retreat, its vast bulk beginning to turn away from this impossible opponent. But JÖRMUNGANDR was not finished. All nuclear arsenals, continuous fire, railguns, target the creature's propulsion systems, mass drivers, focus on structural weak points identified by the previous strikes. The human ship transformed into an engine of absolute destruction. Nuclear warheads detonated in continuous sequence across the Devourer's hull, each one tearing away armor and structure. Railgun slugs punched through the creature's bulk like bullets through paper, creating massive exit wounds that vented atmosphere and vital fluids into space. The Devourer fought back with increasing desperation. Its hull began to regenerate, trying to replace the massive damage being inflicted. But the humans had studied their enemy during the approach and identified the fatal flaw in its defensive strategy. The creature could adapt to energy weapons because energy could be redirected, absorbed or converted, but it could not adapt to having its physical structure simply removed from existence by kinetic impacts traveling at relativistic speeds. As the battle raged, Admiral Corvin and the Hegemony fleet received real-time sensor data from their long-range instruments. What they were witnessing challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Sir," Commander Rex reported, his voice filled with awe. "The human vessel is inflicting massive damage to the Devourer. Current estimates suggest they have destroyed approximately 40% of the creature's total mass." Corvin stared at the tactical display. 40%? In how long? 18 minutes, sir. 18 minutes to accomplish what centuries of galactic civilization had deemed impossible. The implications were staggering. If humans could destroy a Devourer, what else were they capable of? On JÖRMUNGANDR, damage reports were coming in from multiple sections. The ship had not escaped unharmed. Hull breaches in 17 compartments, 3 weapon systems offline, and shield generators operating at 60% capacity. But they were still fighting, still inflicting horrific damage on their ancient enemy. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, "the creature is attempting to deploy harvester drones toward our position." Hayes looked at the display showing dozens of mechanical parasites launching from the Devourer's bulk. Each one was the size of a frigate and armed with weapons designed to strip ships apart at the molecular level. "Point defense systems online. Show them what close-quarters combat means to humans." The space around JÖRMUNGANDR erupted in defensive fire. Rapid-fire kinetic weapons filled the void with a deadly cloud of metal. The harvester drones, designed to overwhelm opponents through numbers, found themselves flying into a meat grinder. They were designed to face energy weapons that could be adapted to. They were not prepared for thousands of pieces of metal moving at hypervelocity. The drones disappeared in clouds of expanding debris, torn apart before they could close to effective range. But the Devourer was learning. Its vast intelligence was analyzing the human attacks, searching for patterns it could exploit. The creature began to shift its tactics, using its massive bulk to absorb damage while maneuvering to bring its most powerful weapons to bear. A beam weapon the size of a skyscraper, focused on JÖRMUNGANDR's central hull. The energy output was equivalent to a star's corona, concentrated into a beam narrow enough to punch through planetary cores. The beam struck the human ship and held for nearly 30 seconds. When it finally cut off, everyone expected to see empty space where JÖRMUNGANDR had been. Instead, the ship was still there, her hull glowing cherry red from absorbed heat but structurally intact. "Damage report," Hayes requested. "Minor hull buckling on decks 12 through 15. No critical systems affected. Shield generators are actually showing increased efficiency from the energy absorption." The Devourer's intelligence experienced something that might have been equivalent to despair. Its most powerful weapon had proven insufficient. These creatures possessed defensive technology that turned attacks into additional power for their systems. But humans, it was learning, were not content with merely surviving attacks. All remaining planet crackers simultaneous launch. Target the creature's core structure. 6 miniature stars launched from JÖRMUNGANDR simultaneously, their gravitational fields warping space around them as they accelerated toward their target. The Devourer tried to intercept them with defensive fire, but the weapons were moving too fast and generating too much gravitational distortion to be easily targeted. The impacts came within seconds of each other, each one removing massive chunks of the creature's central bulk. But it was the combined effect that proved decisive. The multiple detonations created a cascade resonance that propagated through the Devourer's entire structure. Ancient metal, that had survived millions of years, began to come apart at the molecular level. Systems that had consumed entire civilizations simply ceased to function. The creature's death scream echoed across dimensions as its distributed intelligence fragmented and died. When the light faded and the debris clouds dispersed, only one ship remained intact in the void. JÖRMUNGANDR hung motionless in space, her hull scarred and blackened but unbroken. Behind her drifted the expanding wreckage of something that had terrorized the galaxy since before most species had discovered fire. Captain Hayes activated the communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain David Hayes of the United Earth ship JÖRMUNGANDR. The threat has been neutralized. New Haven is safe. We are prepared to resume diplomatic negotiations at your convenience." Across the galaxy, species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization began to reconsider their assumptions about primitive technology and the beings who wielded it. The silence that followed the destruction of the Devourer was not peaceful. It was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath, waiting to understand what had just changed forever. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Corvin stared at the sensor readings that confirmed what his eyes refused to believe. The ancient nightmare that had haunted galactic civilization for millions of years was gone, reduced to slowly expanding clouds of debris, and the humans were calmly requesting to resume trade negotiations. "Sir," Commander Rex said quietly, "we are receiving priority communications from the Hegemony High Command, the Stellar Congress, the Federation of Free Worlds, and approximately 47 other galactic governments. They all want to know the same thing, which is, what are the humans and how do we make sure they remain friendly?" Corvin almost laughed at the understatement. 47 governments wanting to know about the humans. By tomorrow it would be every major power in the galaxy. The species that had just treated a galactic extinction event as target practice would find themselves the most sought-after allies in known space. On the surface of New Haven Prime, 12 billion beings watched, their skies with new understanding. The dots of light that had appeared during the battle were already becoming legend. The lone ship that had stood between them and oblivion, crewed by beings from a world called Terra, who had never even heard of New Haven until a few hours ago. Emergency sessions were being called in every major government center across the galaxy. The hegemony of 7 worlds, which had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for 3 centuries, suddenly found themselves facing the uncomfortable reality that they were no longer the apex predator in their own territory. Captain Hayes stood in JÖRMUNGANDR's medical bay, watching his crew receive treatment for injuries sustained during the battle. 17 people had been hurt when hull breaches compromised atmospheric integrity in the forward sections. None of the injuries were life-threatening, but each one represented a person who had risked everything for beings they had never met. "Captain," Dr. Foster approached with her cultural analysis pad in hand. "I have been monitoring communications traffic from across the local sector. The response to our actions is quite remarkable." "In what way?" "Every major government is repositioning their diplomatic priorities. Species that were enemies yesterday are forming emergency alliances to present a unified front when dealing with us. The destruction of the Devourer has fundamentally altered the balance of power in this region of space." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "What are they most concerned about?" "Our intentions, primarily. They understand our technological capabilities now, but they have no framework for understanding our motivations. Why would a species with the power to destroy ancient nightmares limit themselves to defensive actions? Why offer trade negotiations instead of simply taking whatever we want?" The captain smiled slightly. "Because that is not who we are, Doctor. Humanity did not claw its way up from the caves by conquering everything in sight. We survived by learning when to fight and when to cooperate. The communication system activated, showing Admiral Corvin on the main screen. The alien leader looked significantly less arrogant than he had during their first contact. In fact, he appeared almost humble. Captain Hayes, I am transmitting formal apologies from the Hegemony High Command for our earlier hostile actions. We did not understand who we were dealing with. Admiral, no apology is necessary. First contact situations are always complex. We bear no ill will toward your people. Corvin seemed surprised by the response. You show remarkable restraint for a species with your capabilities. Our intelligence services have been analyzing your vessel's performance against the Devourer. Your weapons technology appears to be several thousand years ahead of anything we possess. Hayes exchanged glances with Dr. Foster. Admiral, our weapons are not advanced by galactic standards. They are simply designed according to different principles. Different how? Your civilizations appear to have focused on elegant, efficient solutions that can be adapted and improved upon. Our approach was shaped by a world where survival required overwhelming any threat completely and permanently. We do not build weapons to defeat enemies. We build them to ensure enemies can never threaten us again. The implications of that statement seemed to sink in slowly. Corvin's mandibles clicked nervously. Captain, if I may ask, what would happen if someone were to actually threaten your homeworld? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, the ship you have seen represents our diplomatic capabilities. Terra has never sent its military vessels beyond our solar system. This is a diplomatic ship? Yes. JÖRMUNGANDR is designed for long-range exploration and peaceful contact. Her weapons are purely defensive in nature. Across the bridge, several crew members smiled grimly at that description. Defensive weapons that could crack planets and destroy moon-sized entities. The aliens were getting their first lesson in human perspectives on proportional response. Over the next several hours, communication requests poured in from across the galaxy. The Stellar Congress wanted to offer humanity full membership with voting rights. The Federation of Free Worlds was prepared to grant humans most favored nation trading status. The Pacifist Alliance was requesting technological assistance with their own defensive programs. Each request was politely acknowledged and forwarded to Earth for consideration by the appropriate authorities. The aliens found this bureaucratic approach baffling. Why would a species with such overwhelming power need to consult with anyone about anything? Dr. Foster provided the answer during one of the diplomatic exchanges. We are not conquerors, Ambassador. We are representatives of our people, not their rulers. These decisions will be made by humanity as a whole, not by a single ship's crew. The concept of collective decision-making by an entire species was so foreign to most galactic civilizations that it required extensive cultural briefings to explain. Most advanced societies were ruled by either hereditary monarchies, military hierarchies, or technocratic councils. The idea that billions of beings could participate in determining their civilization's direction was almost incomprehensible. But it explained something that had been puzzling xenobiologists across the galaxy. How could a species develop such devastating weapons while maintaining apparently peaceful intentions? The answer was that humans had learned to separate the capacity for violence from the desire to use it. As JÖRMUNGANDR prepared to depart for Terra to deliver her first contact, reports Admiral Corvin made one final transmission. Captain Hayes, before you leave, I must ask something that has been troubling me. Why did you save us? We were prepared to destroy your ship. We showed you nothing but hostility. Yet when the Devourer appeared, you immediately placed yourselves in danger to protect worlds you had never seen. Hayes considered the question carefully. Admiral, we have a saying on Terra. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The Devourer represented evil in its purest form. Allowing it to consume innocent lives when we had the power to prevent it would have made us complicit in that evil. But the risk to yourselves was acceptable. Humanity learned long ago that some things are worth dying for. The lives of 12 billion innocent beings definitely qualified. As JÖRMUNGANDR engaged her hyperspace drive and disappeared into the void, she left behind a galaxy that would never be the same. Word of the human ship and her crew spread at the speed of light along communication networks that spanned thousands of worlds. The hegemony of 7 worlds began restructuring their military doctrine, recognizing that their era of technological supremacy was over. The Stellar Congress established a new department of human relations. The Federation of Free Worlds started developing cultural exchange programs designed to better understand their new neighbors. But perhaps most significantly, the Pacifist Alliance began developing their own kinetic weapons programs, not for conquest but for defense. The galaxy had learned that sometimes peace must be defended with overwhelming force, and that there was a difference between being peaceful and being helpless. 6 months later, when the first official diplomatic mission from Terra arrived at the galactic capital, they were greeted not as conquering invaders but as the most respected species in known space. Humanity had earned something that no amount of technological superiority could provide: the genuine respect of their peers. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun not with conquest, but with the simple demonstration that some beings would risk everything to protect others. It was a lesson that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. And somewhere in the deep archives of the Galactic Historical Society, a new entry was filed under the heading Humanity First Contact. The entry was brief but comprehensive. A lone Terran ship arrived. The galaxy trembled at JÖRMUNGANDR. Then the galaxy learned what it meant to have humanity as a friend rather than an enemy. The universe became a safer place.